Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build AI Skills with Nico Lafakis. How you doing, man?
Doing very well, sir. Doing very well.
Me too. It's been an interesting week for sure. Hopefully we can hopefully we can bring some levity and some learning in before the end of the wire here. I know I'm excited. And obviously I'm just a Final Fantasy fanboy, and that's why I'm excited. Been thinking about a data set like this forever. Uh, and, but of course, as I'm building it out, I'm like, this probably could be better. Like I have a thing for Claude. I don't use GPT enough, and I know like there's roadblocks I might not be hitting with if I were using GPT, and vice versa. So that's what we hope to share today is kind of the build out of a demo data set using these two systems. So when I first shared that thought with you, Nico, like
hmm
what was going through your mind as far as like why that might be valuable for people to see?
The first thing I thought of was people understanding the difference between the tools and why you would use one to get a particular type of output. So, like we're playing in the background now with building Claude projects to do certain things to try to do planning and strategy and things of that nature. And that's where it kind of clicks, right? Is that again, each one has its own purpose. So using Claude to generate content makes perfect sense. Using Claude to generate strategy is a little bit, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's not quite as fulfilling. You may not get quite as many ideas as using GPT for the same process because the just the level of reasoning that GPT has for problem solving with O1 preview is really I wouldn't say it's like infinitely better than 3.5 Sonnet, but it is better. It just understands planning a lot better.
Yes, and so we're gonna dive right in because it's really it makes you just have to trust us on this one. It's gonna make sense, we promise. And you know, for most people I've interacted with, and I know you mention it all the time, Nico, like unless you see it and watch it happen, like watch it generate the stuff, right? It doesn't sink in on how powerful this stuff can be. And also how much the human is still involved in like the value that what happens when you apply critical thinking or creativity to what it's giving you. It's just like, I mean, we haven't experienced anything like it before. So I'm
No,
gonna kind of
and
go through that thought process as I show some stuff, and then feel free to chime in, Nico. This is where so and again, like, so the progression of all these tools, right, and how we will learn the tools from experience to experience. Like we talk about it in HubSpot a lot. Like just because you saw it 6 months ago and didn't like it, maybe check in on it now, and it's probably way different, way better.
mhm,
When I first like heard about GPT and the ability, you know, maybe it was a post from you, and you're like, man, it's so easy to make data sets, and people should be doing this. Dax was showing me some cool stuff, and I was like, okay. So I just roll into GPT, and I'm like, all right, create a Final Fantasy data set. That's it. Like that's the prompt. Like I want to use it in HubSpot. Like
yeah,
so it's like basically not gonna respond very well to that prompt at that point. And so I start to say, all right, this is what I want the contacts to look like. Give me these fields. Go look at this website. And it was like, instead of doing it, it was like, this is how you would go get the information. This is how you could scrape it because I'm not allowed to scrape it, or all these situations where it's like,
yeah,
I've watched you do this for other people, and now you won't do it for me. So that's where I was back there like 6 months ago. So this time I'm like, all right, let's get current state down. Like, how does Claude see the Final Fantasy data set, or how does it understand the universe over here?
Yeah,
And as I was doing it, it's like, oh, this is not different from being asked to go find a bunch of prospects and Zoom info, right?
exactly.
Right. So it's like, instead of, could you list all characters found in Final Fantasy franchise of games? It's like, hey, could you I need a list Zoom info of all the people who work for Final Fantasy, right? Same kind of
Right.
deal. So it's like, all right, so we get that list. And this is me just establishing what it knows, right? What is the current state? What is it going to give me? Because that was another thing. Like, if you just ask it to go into fake data set, like right away, it's going to give you some fake data, like more fake than you want it to be. uh, so from there, it's like, all right, so I'm thinking, like, all right, we got contacts as the data set. Now we need company records. Let's think of, so it could be just me. I know not everybody thinks of companies in this way, but a lot of people are moving it. Like, the addresses, like, if it has an address, like, we need to try and use the company record, right?
Hmm.
That's the best way for me to define, like, why we need to move away from just one company to rule everything, and then everybody looks at
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? Because that doesn't work after, like,
It
maybe
doesn't scale.
halfway through the deal, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's yeah, and like, it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, maybe that works if SDRs are the only ones using company records. But after that, we got to ship things different places, and the differentiation almost always relates to region-based, information. For me, at least, from what I've seen. Um, so it gives me. So that's why I kind of said, like, let's do cities, like, as a good way to, start to differentiate on these records.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, okay, I want to do deals and products. Uh, so all the items that we'd find in the game that we'd buy or find, right? Makes sense to me to build out like a product library, basically the stuff that will be sold on a deal.
Hmm.
So then I'm like, okay, this is good. Like, it's giving me real information. So at this point, I'm the one understanding my business, in this case, my you know my obsession with the Final Fantasy universe. I can actually look at the data and I can understand, okay, there's some accuracy here. It knows what I want it to know before we move forward,
Right.
right? um, so I say, okay, what I'd like to do now is build a demo data set for HubSpot. So that's the key difference. I didn't
Hmm.
start with this, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
let's not bias it right off the bat. Like, just tell
Right.
me what you know. Um, includes contacts, companies, deals, tickets, products, line items, orders, invoices, and subscriptions. Again, this is when you think of how these items are trained, or these items, these these models are trained, right? Like, if I just asked it for a straight up HubSpot data set without context, it's
Yeah.
probably giving me contacts, companies, and deals, and that's it, right? Because that's how the majority of the world thinks about HubSpot at the moment, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so right away, letting it know, because it might not even know that you have orders in HubSpot. it's that's happened since April. Uh, so right away, like, highlighting what I actually want out of the data set. And so I'm like, do you need any information for you to be able to do that for me? It asked me some great questions, which are basically like, what is your business model? Like, what are you actually trying to, like,
Do with
represent,
this data. Yep.
right, with the data set? I'm like, great question. For number of records, I give it the leeway. Just use these previous documents. Like, that's the number of records we'll use. I don't have a set, limit. For the other record types, I'd like to see 50 of each with naming conventions that tie them all together. Like any business use case, we should use a mix of standard HubSpot properties. That was a great question, right? Do you want to follow HubSpot standard object properties, or should we create custom properties specific to the Final Fantasy universe?
Hmm.
Uh, Thank you so much for that question, because how often do we see people, focus on one or the other,
Right.
right? It's either we have baggage related to customizing anything, so we just go out of the box. You can't, don't make any properties unless absolutely need to, right? Or it's like, we're going to build this exactly how we want it, so we're not going to worry about any of the standard properties. And in doing so, we're going to miss out on like half of the functionality, of HubSpot while we do that. So that's why I say, like any business use case, there should be a mix. Usually, the business model should represent in-game shops selling to adventurers. Uh, the sales cycle takes 2 years, or
2 years.
no,
Wow.
the data should
Okay.
cover like 2 years worth of data. And we'll say stick with USD. I like the offer of allowing me to use the Final Fantasy universe um, currency type. But since we're putting it at HubSpot, that's not
We'll
a
use
native
okay.
option. So we'll use USD. Uh, and you want to include specific, or oh, should the data set reflect realistic business patterns, right? Seasonal trends, sales cycles, or keep it simple? I said realistic sales cycles. Let's do that. Even though that's probably like, which industry are we talking about?
Hmm.
Do you want to include any specific locations or territories or regions? Territories would be a nice touch, and I think you can include the game name as a variable to help with that. So basically saying like, Final Fantasy 1 is a company record, like that's going to associate those contacts and things related to that game and so on.
Right.
Like, or I can let you decide how to do that. Uh, okay, here's the plan. I'll help create this comprehensive data set given the complexity and interconnected nature of the data. Let's not just dive in and just all of a sudden we have a spreadsheet that has everything the way we want it. First, I'll create a schema showing how the objects will relate to each other and what properties, both standard and custom, will include for each object type. Uh, then I'll create the actual data sets. I'll include some custom properties. Give me an example. Would you like me to start by showing you the proposed schema first? Uh, I say this approach looks great. Please proceed. Go into data schema. And mind you, this probably took me,
What? 20
this is
minutes tops?
15 minutes, 15 minutes to go through everything I'm showing you, right? This is where when we say things like the hardest part is deciding that you want to do this stuff now,
Yep.
like this is not hard anymore. Like, and we're just using Final Fantasy universe in this demo data set as an example. But, part of my favorite thing that was happening here is what's really hard in the HubSpot ecosystem right now is since we've had this adjustment, this chain rapid evolution towards customer platform, towards way more objects than contact company deal, it's very hard to find like relevant use case information about how I should be using tickets, what kind of properties are other people using, things like that.
Hmm.
So since I'm using uh, you know, Claude in this case, and I say like here's the objects, like if it were to go search HubSpot only data, it would not come back with like any custom properties for orders probably,
No.
right? But instead, I'm like, just check, and it comes back with the way that other systems like manage orders, right? And invoices, right? Subscriptions, and then brings it all together, like the synthesis of this information. Uh, you know, so
And not only
powerful.
that, look at like the fact that it is very detailed, right? So it's not only telling you like what custom properties you need to build or custom objects you need to build, but how you need to build them. If it's a drop down, it gives you the drop down variables, right? Like there is so little because that's how it should be. It should be the case that you are just developing the strategy and you are just helping to make the final decisions and not having to do all of this legwork. That's like, I don't know, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, because so much of this is just like a lot of people have been held back by, and no, no shade at developers. Like you've been so helpful to make a lot of this stuff happen, and even where we are now. Um, but when you know that the process only takes like 5 minutes to do, like if you just had any kind of API knowledge at all,
Yep.
right? And you can't figure it out no matter how much help docs there are. Like it can be frustrating, right? And that's where like instead of companies like swallowing the pride and asking for help or paying for the help, they just don't do it, right?
Right.
And now they can, right? As long as you're understanding, like again, like this is not like verbatim, like okay, go import to HubSpot, ready to go, right? uh I say here the caveat after it gives me like data generation rules, and again, I'll just say like every admin I've ever talked to is short on documentation.
Hmm.
Like the documentation is always on the list, whether it's
Yep.
mapping stuff, whether it's defining things, and they never get to it. So this is not replacing them. They're not even doing that. They've got other stuff. They need to be managing the people that they work with, like
Right.
the relationships, making sure people are adopting the systems, not spending their time, creating documentation when we have tools that can do that very quickly. But they need to be there to say, okay, uh,
This is the
I
plan.
like where you're going, but caveat every closed deal, and this is me understanding like how the ecosystem like uses deals, right? Everything has revolved around a closed deal. So if you want to track revenue, you're just entering a closed deal like right away. That's the first time the
You're
deal
having to
enters the
close it.
system as
Yeah.
closed one, right? Because we're having to trigger a workflow, we're having to track the amount, right? But now we're in a world where if there's no sale to be managed, we shouldn't be creating a deal. And we only have been to track revenue and stuff. Now we have orders and invoices and subscriptions and all these other things where if you're just, rebuying it, it actually gives me some examples here to help articulate. I get excited about this stuff, man. So I don't always articulate it the best. Claude helps me with that. Uh, so I'll create additional orders and invoices that aren't deal related for scenarios like direct purchases,
Hmm.
subscription generated orders, emergency supplies. Like all these things, there's no deal to manage with stages. Like it's just, I need it
With
now,
those
I'm
things.
buying, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, not deals.
Right.
uh, and then
Or
it says,
just a
okay,
simple like purchase order, right? Like
yeah,
they're not, it's just a one off. I just need to buy it because that's, I need to buy it. I don't have to, we don't have to go through the steps, right?
yeah. And that's where, like, especially in industrial manufacturing, like you force me to go through the steps, even though we've already, like, because your system needs
Hmm.
the quote in order to fire everything else off. And it's like, no, I don't want to do these things just because you're like, and in reality, and the best sales guys and inside sales teams, they will do the things for the customer, right? And not ask
Right.
the customer to do that. But even they're on the inside doing a bunch of stuff just to get their, automation going, right?
Yeah.
Um, shouldn't be that way. So it updates the schema based on that new information. Uh, and I'm like, hey, I haven't seen, let's see, the updated, right? So we've been talking about deals, and this is where it's just the visual here that it pops out, right? Like just
Mhm.
helping me understand like more custom properties based on that change. Um, we haven't really talked about pipelines very much yet. So before getting started, how are you thinking about managing status? Via the object pipelines found in deals, orders, and tickets. So I'm constantly confirming here. This is my bias uh, that I know that not a lot of great pipeline information exists out there for not deals. So making sure if I say pipelines, I'm also including the other objects that I know to have pipelines that it may not. Uh, so we go into some pipeline configurations. This is where some of the power of this is like no matter how well you think you know your process,
Mhm.
like be open to suggestions
Right.
from AI, right?
Right. It's just a matter like, it really is a matter of expanding the possibilities. It's a matter of, like, yes, you do know how to do these things. Yes, you do know how to think through these things, but did you think about this? And it's probably something like, okay, maybe it's not something better, but it's gonna give you so many options that you're gonna find gems in there that you just hadn't considered before, and it's gonna be all the better for you're gonna be all the better for it. Like, that's where you see those productivity gains. That's where you see those efficiency gains. That's where you see the ability to, like, oh, okay, it's 90% on the mark. Cool, I've saved 90% of my time, and now I just need to focus on this little 10%.
Yes, exactly. And like I got to a couple of great examples here, right? Again, like once we get into the non-standard objects,
Right.
like order pipeline, like of course. And this is where if you like I go into Shopify right now and I see the exact same, like I see similar things, right? Or any
Yeah.
ERP obviously does this, but if you did a Google search right now and looked for HubSpot order pipelines, like you would not find anything. Um, get ticket pipeline support, right? Warranty claims pipeline,
Yeah.
like, right? Definitely not a HubSpot thing. Can easily be done in HubSpot. Um, then we've got pipeline relationships, right? So it covers the gambit. Uh, and this is these are like first passes, right? Like a lot can be learned and leveraged in terms of like digging in to make sure it's working for your business. If this was like, specific to your business and you're trying to figure out how to do things,
Mhm.
right? How to set things up inside of HubSpot. Now, this is where I need Nico's help. Uh, so I'm like, okay, great. Let's generate some data. And I also need to understand that sometimes AI will think too much like a human and be like, "Oh yeah, I can do this stuff because this is what this process I learned about involves. Step 3 is definitely me doing this for you, so I will do that. Except I can't." Um, so I specifically ask, and this is where like maybe I shouldn't even have been that specific. Like, give it to me in CSV format because at this point I'm thinking I need to get it into HubSpot, right?
Right.
So the way I best know as a non-developer, somebody who doesn't mess with APIs, is I need a CSV that I can just run through the importing tool.
Mhm.
So it asks one object at a time or the full set of CSVs. I love your confidence, Claude, here. Um, uh, Also, for formatting the CSVs, would you like email addresses, right? Love these questions. And this is where we've come a lot farther from this time last year, where it probably just pumps it out, right?
Yep.
Without a
Directly.
lot of these clarifying questions. Um,
Yeah.
so I say let's do one at a time. Uh, Emails based on character names, phone numbers to represent international mix, dates as this, and no decimals in the currency. Right? And then it's like, okay, I'll start with the contact CSV using characters from our earlier Final Fantasy character list artifact.
And
And
you
it
got
gives me this. So
now
why did I get this result?
technically that is a CSV, right? So it is comma separated values. You could take it into a spreadsheet and you could waste a lot of time trying to work that out. Um, we let's try doing this. So I want to do this two different ways because when you mentioned you're not a developer, that actually um, sprang something to mind. So the first way we're going to do it is, and the reason why we're doing this is primarily to show you like GPT is multimodal. So is Claude, but just not in the same output capacity, right? So like Claude can't generate images, it can't generate files, it can't search the web. You can upload documents to it, but you can't then get like formatted documents back, right? So GPT can do all these things. It can create spreadsheets for you. It can read spreadsheet data no problem. It understands how to process it very well. So it's really easy to do one of two different things. Either you can literally, actually, there's three different ways if you want to slice it that much. You can either copy paste the CSV output that you got from Claude into it, and then just tell it, can you turn this into a spreadsheet, a downloadable spreadsheet for me? The second way would be really not that much different, just kind of depends on how you like to handle things. You could even go to the artifact, and in that bottom right hand corner, there's a little download button. So you could download that and upload it to GPT, which we will use that. Uh, if not today, I'll definitely show an example of what that looks like next time. Because while this is very cool, and I'm not trying to Claude at all, what's even cooler is being able to download all those individual files and then upload those to GPT and have GPT give you like the completed sheet with like all of that stuff cross referenced into it.
So all of
Not
the,
easy.
so basically create like all of the CSVs at once with associations and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And you can
definitely
tell
where
it
I want to
like,
go. So we'll download and see what we got.
fingers crossed.
Yep.
There we go.
And
Now
this
you
is
got
where,
your,
of course, I knew by the length of the text that Claude gave me that it wasn't nearly as many contact records as I would need, right?
yeah.
So not
You can
only,
actually ask now GPT and you can say, based on the sample data set in rows 2 through 15 or 2 through 16, can you make another 15 rows of data that are dissimilar to the initial ones, right? Or yeah, that's the
or,
spreadsheet direction is the only one that I've had.
right, like this is where I might attach, uh, let me, this is where I might attach the other files, right? That
Mm,
has, because I still want to fill out my Final Fantasy information.
okay.
And
Yes, let's
so
go
if
back
I,
and download the individual files for um, all the different structures and then the updated schema.
all right, so we've got Final Fantasy characters, got Final Fantasy common items, Final Fantasy locations, Final Fantasy pipelines. How many can I attach here?
I think it's like 10 or something.
Okay, there's schema one, schema two.
Oh, we only
All
need
right,
schema 2. We don't want to confuse it.
well, that's where Claude does this thing where it's like these are the updates, everything else stayed the same,
Mm,
right? You know what I mean? Like
okay.
where it goes, it's like data schema and it gives me everything, right?
Mm,
And then the updated version, it's like standard
I see what you
properties,
mean. It's
view
the
object,
additional
right?
to it. Yep.
Everything stays the same.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
at this point, I'm hoping, like when I really want this to be a finished document, I'll ask Claude to say, like, okay, put them both
Can you
together
combine it? Yeah.
now. But I think the way that this is output, we should be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll be
So
right.
what do
So
I do?
start by just asking it to take a look at the files that you've uploaded.
Can you
And
take a look?
the reason we're going to do this is so that, again, we just want to give context to GPT so it understands what it is we're working with. If we just tell it right out the gate, hey, do this with this file and do this with this file, it's going to try to do those things while not fully having understood like what's going on with it, right? Um, okay, ask it. Let me see. Analyze the files and let me know uh, what types of data you find. It's so funny, like, and I know Chris gets upset because like they watch me work in GPT a lot, and I don't have to be like super direct. I just say stuff, and they're just blown away. And it's like I watch other people do it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess add this more specific like language.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And this is where I
now it
haven't set up
understands what we're
any,
working with.
and I haven't. So what I was showing here, just for additional context, is like, so this is actually not in a cloud project. Like this was all started in just a 3.5 sonnet chat without any directions anywhere else guiding it. All right, now we're in, and something I'm going to grab because we're about to uh, make the same request, right, is to build out this demo data set. And maybe I copy this question too. Um, so as I go to GPT, this is 4.0. Uh, and you need special advanced stuff for, or you need special approval to get to O1 preview. Yeah.
It just doesn't have the attachment capability yet.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yep. But I'll show you
All
what
right.
we're gonna do once you get this.
Right. So again, no custom instructions in place here. No custom GPT supporting this yet.
Okay,
So now what?
so the next step from here is just going to be, can you fill in the first spreadsheet with additional uh, data based on the character uh, HubSpot character file? So the first example is just going to show that we can add on to what's initially been created. And I'm not going to lie, it is very difficult. It's a lot of work for GPT to generate spreadsheet data. So it's it really, though it seems like you're asking for a pretty simple thing, it really isn't, right? And at the end of the day, you're getting a task that would have probably taken you an hour or so. You're getting that done and back to you within 2 minutes or so. So it's like there's still a lot of efficiency that's being had there. So we'll end up with your typical upload files, right? So we'll have one for your contacts. We'll end up with one for your deals and then one for your company. And then what we want to do is take the schema and have that produce your properties file that you're going to want to use for upload.
And this is where 6 months ago I was disappointed all every time because I know it's like you tell me there's 100 characters and you're giving me 20.
Right,
Like
right.
So we'll see extended. I remember these file names too.
I love that it does that. Like it auto iterates for you.
All right, where are we at?
And if you say like,
So,
okay, let's try it one last time like this, right?
yeah,
Okay, so this is where, yeah, this is where I end up having issues with it, right? Because it did a fair, basically it only did a fair job with the names and nothing else. Um,
right,
so it definitely has like issues being able to handle that. Um, and that's where, like, if you ask, that's where the logic is different. So, like, if I had to describe the two, I would say like Claude is more logical and Chat is more reasonable, I guess. So like Chat can, it's more like an engineer. So like Chat can pound stuff out for you all day, but you have to like be pretty accurate with it. You can't slack in what you're asking it to do. Whereas with Claude, you
right,
can ask it for dummy data and it understands what you mean by that. Like it has a very, it just has, it understands, like it has a very good way of understanding the natural way in which we speak about things. So it knows like, oh yeah, you probably need something like this. So if you really wanted to expand the character set, you could go back to Claude and say, can I get an expanded version or can I get an additional uh, set of CSV data to add into it, right?
right.
Um, for
Okay,
for the time being, we're going to say, um, can you take or can you use the where is it? The Final Fantasy locations file and create uh, use the term create dummy data in a spreadsheet for me to upload to a CRM.
all right. Can you use the file to create dummy data in a spreadsheet for upload into HubSpot CRM?
So should be able to get this. I'm not sure what the output is going to look like. I like that it says suitable. This is suitable data, sir. This should suffice for your needs.
There we go. That's a
Mm,
list at least.
it's a list. And so like from this, again, like chat is
Hmm.
not very, yeah, you could see like, I guess, yeah, I would go a little bit further and say like, it's not very original or something. Like it doesn't really know how to do like original thinking in a sense. Um,
Right. Well, it's
totally understands how to do iteration. So if you told it, for every major city, pick an actual city, or for every um, for like you could say for every duplicate value, create a new unique value. In fact, I would say just that. If
what
you asked it to create a data set, I would say using unique values.
right. Well, that's I think that makes sense for the rest of the like data sets. But what it's
Mm,
actually doing here is differentiating between these are actual like cities in the game
right.
versus like just like landmarks or like
Yeah.
places that you go, right? Um, and these kinds of things are like HubSpot San Francisco as a location type versus like HubSpot, sales division or inbound as an event or, you
Mhm.
know, starting to differentiate that way. So I'm
So the
I'm
setup
actually
is
happy
accurate.
that it
So
differentiated, right?
let's go back to GPT and ask it to
Oops.
take a look at, is it the first or second schema that has the companies one in it?
The first one.
Okay, so let's ask GPT and say, can you take a look at the HubSpot? Yeah, just copy paste on that. Take a look at this file and can you add any additional columns of data that are needed to the spreadsheet? And so the whole like point of this exercise is I'm sure a lot of you have wished that you could spin up like a dummy account or dummy portal like really quickly and be able to fill it with example data to show a customer how certain functionality works. This is the quickest and easiest way to do this, right? In half hour, Chris has the setup for it. In another 15-20 minutes, we've got the spreadsheets ready with the columns set, with the data in there. So we don't even have to do anything. We just go to HubSpot, go to import, put in the spreadsheets, and get to work.
Exactly. Because we are actually building out a demo portal right now. And, as much as I love doing these shows and being forced to talk about the basics because I don't really have a lot of good data to show, I know that that can only take us so far.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, it's helpful to look at some data. Um, so if we look here, it adds,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So that's where it
right.
could get. Yep.
Yep.
And then you could go back and say, can you make these shop type and territory location uh, values unique to each location name? I would say,
I'm gonna take a kind
and
of
that's
different approach.
have
Let's
at it.
say, so these new columns are not helpful.
Nice.
They do not actually uh, differentiate um, these records. Can you apply meaningful? This is where I'm like, definitely want to deal with probably not the engineer in this case because I can't give it exact specifications. Um,
No, but it's I mean that's the thing is like you're doing it right in that you're telling it what you do want and what you don't want.
can you apply meaningful categories to to each uh, record in the list?
I would say meaningful values.
Okay. Yep. This is where at some point, like once you get used to using these tools,
Mhm.
I like playing with like, okay, maybe it could use a little more, or maybe I should be saying this differently, but being mindful of like whatever it comes back with, you'll be able to tell whether it was enough or not. And
Yep.
either result will help you learn like, okay, I did need to spend an extra 30 seconds figuring out exactly what to say, or I didn't.
Right.
And this is one of the places where I don't need to do that. Because so much of this, again, like I'm already seeing, like, myself sometimes I bias the model, right? And the model is the one that's smarter than me. Like, so, so
Yeah, I
here
figured
we
it was
go.
going to go according to another property type. So yeah, it used location type to mimic how often it should create variables, but I love that it broke the chain on territory location. So on shop type it was like I'll create a different shop type per location. And then on the last column, it was like, okay, I'll do that per two, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Which is
So,
fine, honestly, because like those two location types could exist within that territory or whatever, right? Like, so it actually, like to your point earlier, right? It understood the structure of how that might work, right?
yeah. And this is like, as I'm just because I like to think about things in this way, this is representative of how challenging it can be to manage like data and what happens when you just start adding a property here and then one over here and then a new one over here and then you're supposed to and then you don't have a data map, right? It doesn't go well, and you start putting things that don't matter, into the system that somebody has to clean up later,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's like, so my initial goal here was just the data, right?
Right.
Instead of some other maybe more valuable outcomes that it actually, helped me get to. And this is where I love like the ideation, side of me and innovation. Like it gives you ideas constantly, right?
Yep.
And when it says, like, because my goal was a CSV, right? I was not thinking of that it could give me like a whole documented build out of HubSpot, right? But as soon as I realized that's where we could go, you damn well like better
Yep.
believe that's where I'm going, right?
Right.
So as soon as it's like schema pipeline, okay, CSV. At this point, I know I've got to go over to chat GPT to do stuff. So I'm like, okay, we'll come back to that later. But
Mhm.
uh, here I'm like, okay, ERDs are also something interesting. So can you create a crow's foot diagram that shows a map of the data model? And
Yeah.
within a minute, I think like it gives me this, right? And this is where just the power of, yeah, like obviously this is not like handcrafted, but it's got all the information that
Mhm.
that you're asked for when it comes to ERDs. And now, I mean, honestly, and like ERDs usually leave a little bit to be desired anyways in terms of helping you understand what's actually happening. Like, um, so again, like inside of 30 seconds, it starts doing things that have taken hours, like
Yep.
before, right? And this is
Mhm.
if you haven't done ERDs your whole life, right? Which I have not. Um, but then it says things like, uh, let's see. Yeah, so then like I have a little knowledge of how mermaid diagrams work. So I'm like, just show me the tables, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't need to show how everything's connected because now at this point, maybe I want to give it to somebody. All these properties need to be created. Can you go do that,
Yeah.
right? And here's that table again. Like we're inside of minutes here as far as how long this is taking, right? And these are like brand new properties, with IDs, the property type, right?
Mhm.
And those are the things like how many times do we create properties and then, oh, that should have been a drop down. Shit, right? Or no, that did all this work to make it a multi checkbox with all the options, and
Yep.
it should be single. It should be single line text. Let's be
Yeah,
real with
and you've already
ourselves,
tied it to 30 assets, right?
right? And like, do I really want to create a new entry for every show that we go to, or should I just figure out how to make single line text work?
Right.
Um, so taking this further, right? Because this is like so quickly we get to things where like a lot of the complexity of HubSpot is being represented here, but we can do it in building blocks in a way that can help, people understand. So as I took it to not only understand, but understand the importance of
Yeah.
every piece, every connection. Like you cannot, like when you do, um, kind of wave your hand and be like, oh, just let the developer take care of it. That doesn't understand your business,
Mhm.
right? Good luck coming up with great like primary keys that are actually going to be, matter to your business, especially if you haven't told them about the other system, that you might want to integrate with later, right?
Mhm.
So I brought this into a new chat in Claude, and I gave it a heads up, like I'm going to be giving you some stuff, right? But as I give it to you, feel free to make any kind of comments that you think, would be valuable. And in this case, this is a project called the Chief Strategy Officer in our Let's Build Media uh, Claude team. So it does have documents like the kind of shows that we do the way that I think about HubSpot, you know, so there's the way that, this chief strategy officer, like how it gives advice, right? Like, so there is some instructions and some project knowledge driving some of these answers, which a lot of it comes from like Let's Build Media. Our mission is to help close this knowledge gap,
Yep.
right? That we're talking about already. So most of the advice that I get relates to that, right? So uh, before giving it anything, I'm like, how does that sound? Right. And then it says, that sounds great. And it tells me exactly, what it's going to be looking for and how it's going to be commenting, based on how we've set up the project so far. Um, so the educational value of this stuff, like engagement strategy using a well-known gaming universe, can make technical concepts more accessible. Right. So a lot of this is also confirming what I hope to accomplish, right,
Yeah.
with this process.
Hmm.
And then network effect potential. Gaming themed content could attract a unique audience segment, create opportunities for creative content collaboration.
Yep.
Dax, if you're watching, this is for you. Uh, so really excited to see that. I'm like, yep, okay, here's the docs,
Yeah.
right? And it just goes
Yeah.
through all the opportunities to just do more, to leverage more. Like, and this for me, this is the kind of stuff that's been in my head for years,
Hmm.
right? And it's just so much work to get it out that it never comes out, right?
Right.
Like maybe I spend a few hours on a Sunday afternoon, like building a Canva map, and I get like 80% done, and then I never, come back to it, or things like that. And just this kind of help for ideation and innovation. We talk to George about it all the time, right? Like there's things happening that would have never happened, right, without this facilitation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is an amazing way to be able to take what it is you're working on and sort of check against it, and to be able to take theories that you have about how you're approaching things, and to be able to get this super objective view and have it tell you like, yeah, okay, the way that you've been thinking about things, is pretty, that lines up pretty good with, how you want to carry things out. Have you considered this? Right. Like you easily get, I mean, you could see it right there. It's like looking at the schema document. We could further enhance this by doing XYZ. Would you like me to try to develop any of these concepts further? Right. So it's again that the assistance that it can give you is, I don't know, it's endless in my mind. The ideation that it can help you with is likewise endless. And the amount of time that it can save you in planning and process is ridiculous.
Like this is pipelines. Look how fast it's creating
Right.
this. And like you see one
Notifications
of the
that could go
challenges
along
I
with
have,
it,
right? And
workflows.
like, of course, this is Final Fantasy. You're seeing a bunch of words that you don't care about. Replace any of those with your business variables of your target audience, of your products and services. Like it will work just as well, probably better, right? With the direction you give it related to that, right? So
Mhm.
look at these core deal pipelines, primary sales, upsell, cross sell, life cycle stages. Like, and now I just want to show, like, as we wrap up, like, just giving it a minimal amount of direction. Like, can you, because I haven't shown it the ERD yet in
Yeah.
this chat. So can you create an ERD that supports this demo data set that we are building? And this was the thing that brought me back to Claude. Like basically, like since once it artifacts,
Yeah. Being able to
like
carry it
the
and
way
continue it.
it does visuals, like man, like,
Yep.
and this is obviously pretty black and white bare bones, but I'm just looking for a map.
Mhm.
You can tell it make this an interactive, you know,
Yep.
HTML page, right? And um,
And
it's
give it
it's really
specific
really
directions. Say
cool.
like, hey, I want to see whatever. I want to see the breakdown and have it be interactive to where if I click on this, it shows me this. Right. And as long as I don't know, it seems like they kind of updated it, but I don't think you're going to be able to use libraries yet. If it's React based or it's a front end that can be created in React, you can create it in Claude. So a lot of these graphic interfaces that you're seeing, like you saw right in the beginning, it spits out a bunch of code that's written in a React front end where there's public access available, and then uh, the code just it shows you what the render of the code is. Right. I was gonna say you should
And
ask it. Can you um, can you visually can you visually map out the customer journey as well as where life cycle stages and lead status would come into play? Pretty cool.
all right,
Hopefully,
so
it
let me come
color
back to
codes
that.
it for you.
I'm actually going to show a different example because I got it to use React like without me asking for it yesterday.
Mhm.
Um, on a like still so same project here, but we're trying to do some stuff with Let's Build Media. So I'm like gathering like, okay, like, do you understand all the shows? Who's doing recurring shows? Who's doing individual shows? And it's like, I'll create an interactive timeline visualization that shows the evolution of Let's Build Media, showing shows using a combination of historical data and strategic context from the documents, right? It gives me like its analysis, like it's showing its work here. Based on the data analysis, I'll create an interactive timeline visualization that spans from here to here, right? And uh, this is where, like, sometimes you're just one step away from where it wants to get to,
Yep.
right? So it's like building out the clicks. It's like, designing the infrastructure with this one, basically.
Yeah.
And now let me create a more detailed React component that provides interactive exploration of show details and evolution. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like 30 seconds it did this last night, right?
Right.
And that's the preview. We could look at the code. Like, there you go,
Yep.
right? So I know we're not titling this one. Oh, I also started seeing this. Like, it's starting to
The
show
suggestions of like,
the
hey, so you want to start
suggestions.
doing that?
And then behind the suggestion, it shows you the actual prompt that it's going to load in, right? So interactive show timeline, right? I'll just show this, and then we got a wrap. But it's like, I know the name of this show isn't Wake Up. That's our morning show. But like, come on, folks. Like, look at what's happening here. If you're not at least touching this stuff daily, like,
It's
you're not
weird
going
to
to build
me.
any AI skills, right?
Yeah. It like it really does. I'm not joking. For anybody that's wondering, I don't know who would be, but um honestly, if I talk to you, if you come up to me and I talk to you and you tell me that you don't, and you're in our sphere, like you're working in HubSpot, you're doing marketing, you're working in digital, and you tell me that you don't use GPT or that you haven't used it yet or that you kind of use it, it's weird to me. It's real weird at this point. Like we're 2 years in, so it's super weird. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like you can just straight up ask it, hey, can you make it cooler and include some more stuff? Right. It's not even
Yeah.
like you don't even have to. I hate to say it, guy. Like I don't hate to say it. I love to say it. I was just having this conversation with my manager and talking about the fact that and I know we're at the end, but I'll just throw this out there and you guys just have to take it and think about it over the weekend. Neil Brundage, who is one of the chief AI safety people, just left. Another one of them, AI safety people, left OpenAI. And one of his exit statements that he made in an interview recently, when they asked about, okay, but what's the economic impact and what does the future look like and what do you think? He said, I can see people being something like retired within 4 to 6 years.
Yep.
So, this stuff doesn't look hard anymore, and it isn't, right? Like, Chris is doing this stuff, and it's just you just
I've
ask, you
never
have to know how to ask.
I've wanted to. I've thought that I've needed to, but I've never looked at one single piece of React instruction in my life. And I just built it. Like
Yep,
and and that's where I since I see the visual, I can keep building it. I can keep iterating, right? And then like
it's like a spark, right?
yeah. So we hope that was helpful. Those practical demonstrations. I think we've seen a lot of people start to understand faster. So if you guys want to see anything like that, or you've been thinking about demonstrations, maybe you don't have access to, but as you're thinking about that stuff, like you know, there's opportunities. Please find them. Find the opportunities, and
Yep.
let's grow. Have a great weekend, everybody.